He is 11 years old, and he is being measured against a wall. The nurse marks the height in pencil, steps back, checks it twice. Across the room, his father sits with his hands folded, the way people sit when they already suspect what they're about to hear. The boy doesn't understand yet why this number matters so much. He only knows that every other boy on his street has stopped growing taller than him a long time ago, and he hasn't stopped noticing. The doctor's words when they come are quiet. A hormone deficiency. Treatment is available, but it is expensive, month after month, for years. And somewhere in Argentina, on a dusty pitch 2 hours from here, a coach has already seen this same small boy do something with a football that grown men in that stadium have never quite managed. The question the family carries out of that office isn't really about height at all. It's about whether the world will make room for someone this size to become something enormous. Hello, and welcome to Histolingo. I'm glad you're here for this one, because the boy in that waiting room grew up to be the player many call the greatest who ever touched a football. This is the story of how he got there. Rosario, Argentina, in the early 1990s, was a city that ran on football the way other places run on weather. It shaped the mood of every street. Boys played barefoot in alleyways and vacant lots, and among them was a quiet, serious child named Lionel who preferred the ball to almost anything else in his small world. By 4 years old, he was already playing with his older brothers and their friends, boys years ahead of him in size and strength. He lost the ball constantly, he got knocked down constantly, and, according to everyone who watched him, he got back up without a word and asked for the ball again. At 6, he joined the youth academy of a local club, Newell's Old Boys. The coaches there noticed something almost immediately, not just skill, but a strange, total calm with the ball at his feet, as if the chaos around him simply slowed down when it arrived. His team went years without losing a match. People in Rosario started, half-jokingly, to use his name and the word genius in the same sentence. But calm on the pitch didn't change what was happening in his body. Around age 10, it became clear that Lionel had stopped growing at the rate other boys his age were growing. That's what led his parents to the doctor's office and to the diagnosis that would define the next several years of his family's life, far more than any match ever could. The treatment for a growth hormone deficiency isn't simple, and in the 1990s, for a working family in Argentina, it wasn't cheap either. It meant nightly injections, hundreds of them, over years. And it meant a cost that quickly outpaced what his father's factory job and his mother's part-time cleaning work could sustain. For a while, Newell's Old Boys helped cover part of it. Then that support quietly dried up. His parents faced a decision no parent wants to face: continue a treatment their son needed and find the money somehow, or stop and accept that he likely would never reach an average adult height. Meanwhile, the boy kept playing, kept scoring, kept drawing crowds to watch a child who looked 2 years younger than he was outplay boys who towered over him. Word of him had started to travel beyond Rosario. But talent, it turned out, wasn't going to be the hard part of this story. Money was. Then came a possibility that felt almost too fortunate to be real. Relatives living in Catalonia, Spain, arranged a trial with FC Barcelona's famous youth academy, La Masia. The family scraped together what they could and made the long trip across the Atlantic, not entirely sure whether they were chasing a future or a very expensive disappointment. The trial did what trials like this are supposed to do. It convinced the people watching. Barcelona's youth coaches saw the same thing Newell's coaches had seen: a boy whose relationship with the ball looked less like skill and more like instinct, something you couldn't coach into a player who didn't already have it. But convincing the coaches wasn't the same as convincing the club's business side to commit real money to an untested foreign child with an expensive medical condition. Weeks passed. The family waited in Barcelona, running low on both patience and finances, unsure if they'd have to go home with nothing. The story of what happened next has become part of football folklore, repeated so often it's practically scripture in Catalonia. In December of 2000, in a restaurant, the club's technical secretary, worried the family might walk away to a rival club before the paperwork could catch up, grabbed the nearest thing he could find to make it official: a paper napkin. On it, he wrote out the terms of a commitment to sign the boy, right there at the table, and both men signed it. It wasn't a formal contract. It didn't need to be. It was a promise, scrawled on something so ordinary it could have been thrown away by accident, and it was enough to change the direction of an entire family's life. Barcelona agreed to cover his medical treatment. His family relocated permanently, and the boy, who had been measured against a wall in a Rosario clinic, began a new kind of measuring, against the best young players Europe had to offer, in a country where he didn't yet speak the local dialect, missing the streets and cousins and grandmother he'd left behind. It wasn't an easy adjustment. He was homesick. He was still smaller than his teammates, even as the treatment slowly took effect. But on the pitch, something the coaches at La Masia had never quite seen before kept happening. Defenders twice his size would commit to a tackle, certain they had him, and somehow he simply wouldn't be there anymore, gone past them before they'd finish the thought. He rose through Barcelona's youth ranks faster than almost anyone in the club's history, and in October 2004, at 17 years old, he made his first team debut. 2 years later, still a teenager, he was starting to score the kind of goals that made grown commentators reach for words like impossible and mean it literally. By his early 20s, the boy who needed a nightly injection just to grow was being spoken of in the same breath as the greatest players who had ever lived. He would go on to win the Ballon d'Or, the sport's highest individual honor, a record 8 times. He'd win league titles, European titles, nearly everything a club career can offer, wearing the number 10 shirt for the only club that had ever truly believed in him. For years, though, one thing stayed just out of reach: a World Cup with Argentina, the country he'd left as a child and never stopped calling home. He came close more than once, and each time the disappointment seemed to weigh on him more visibly than any club defeat ever had. Critics said he'd conquered everything except the one trophy that mattered most to his own people. Then, in December 2022, in Qatar, in his 4th and likely final World Cup, he finally got there, lifting the trophy at 35 years old, in a final so dramatic it's already being called the greatest ever played. Watching footage of that night, you can see it on his face. Not triumph exactly, but something closer to relief, like a debt finally settled after 30 years.
There is a photograph that circulates from time to time of a boy in Rosario, maybe 6 or 7, wearing a shirt several sizes too big, grinning at the camera with a ball tucked under one arm. He looks impossibly small for the game he was already playing, better than boys twice his age. And somewhere, still, that napkin exists, or a version of it does, its authenticity and whereabouts debated over the years, sold and disputed and mythologized, until it's hard to separate the object from the story it now stands for. A scrap of paper, meant to be thrown away, that instead became the founding document of a career people will study for generations. He was told more than once that he was too small for this game. His own body worked against him before any opponent ever did. And yet the thing that made him extraordinary was never his size at all. It was what he did with the ball and the tiny space his body gave him to work with. Most of us, at some point, have been told we don't quite fit what's expected of us. Too small, too slow, too late, too different from whatever the room seems to want. What his story suggests isn't that the doubt was wrong. It's that the doubt was never really the point. He didn't outgrow being small. He simply became too good to be measured by it. If this story stayed with you, consider subscribing to Histolingo. There are more like it waiting.